Hello, my name is Susana Rodriguez. I'm a psychologist at INSER. Welcome to this space called Voices of Hope, Infertility as a Path of Learning, where our purpose is to inform and support each other in this quest of getting pregnant. We have the honor of having Dr. Sandra Pérez Castro. She's a nutritionist from Universidad Javeriana with more than 25 years of experience, coach in nutrition, specialist in fetal programming, and also in conscious nutrition. She is also part of the team in the coffee area in most of the fertility processes. Dr. Sandra, it's a pleasure to have you here. How are you? Hello, Susana. Thank you for the invitation. I hope this is a great opportunity to clarify doubts and to share information of great value regarding nutrition, fertility, and conscious nutrition. Wonderful. We're going to have Dr. Sandra with a talk called Conscious Nutrition and Fertility. The floor is yours, doctor. Okay, so if you are here, part of this event is because this information is of your interest. The key is from beginning to end. We want you to be very connected with us to share with you information of great value. When we talk about nutrition and fertility, it's very important to take into consideration epigenetics. What is epigenetics? It's a new brand of medicine where you analyze the behavior of the future parents and how those decisions that they make regarding nutrition can impact in the genetic information of their babies, and how that can program the prevention of chronic diseases like diabetes and obesity. When we talk about fetal programming, it's important to take into consideration that the starting point is the epigenetics, where the couple that make the decision to start fetal programming has to start making changes in their lifestyle, in their nutrition, and in the decision making of which foods help to support the immune system and in a way to modulate the genetic information that you can transmit to the future baby. In this process of fetal programming, my invitation is for all those couples that have made the decision to start any process. Is key to identify and to remove the foods that are highly processed. And when we talk about highly processed food, like packaged foods, very elaborate food, pastries, and all these foods like sausages, ham, that are foods that may have modification that can predispose for any genetic predisposition, and that can trigger a difficulty in the fetal programming. So if we take into consideration that fetal programming is the starting point, we definitely know that the cornerstone of the whole process of fetal programming should be nutrition. When we talk about nutrition, when we are empowered and are aware of those decisions and how they modulate the genetic information of our future baby, then it's important to have clear the awareness in the moment of eating. We have to connect not only from the taste and the pleasure, and not only from a hedonistic point of view, but also from the perspective of how to enhance my immune system, how to improve my reproductive system, and how to consciously stop eating the ones we don't need and give place to the food that we need. In order to understand better what's that axis of conscious eating, I want you to know how hunger works and what are the mechanisms in our nervous system that determine our nutritional behavior. So let's remember that in the central nervous system, we have the hypothalamus. In the hypothalamus, there are two centers. There is a ventromedial hypothalamus that controls satiety. It determines and it sends the signal when to stop eating. The other one is the hypothalamus, the lateral hypothalamus, that regulates the sensation of hunger. Both centers are stimulated by peripheral signals that work in the following way. When we see food, only by seeing the texture, the color, connecting with the dish, with the plate, it makes the whole mechanism in our mouth to produce saliva. And we begin to produce enzymes that prepare our body for a good digestion. After the mouth, the food reaches the stomach. It activates some sensors. Let's remember that our gastrointestinal system is our second brain. When we eat and the food is in our stomach, there are sensors in the stomach that are in charge of sending signals to the intestines and to the adipose cells in order for the brain to codify the moment where we have to start eating and when we have to stop eating. In order for this system to work properly, we need approximately 20 minutes. So that's why it's important for the chewing process to be very thorough. So when the time of eating arrives, we need to remember that there's a desire of eating. We start eating. Our survival mechanisms dictates that we need to eat, and according to our beliefs, we choose our food. Once we start eating, the satiety sensation arrives. This is a very complex process that requires time, and if we do it with consciousness, we're gonna optimize this whole physiological process of hunger. Let's remember that the hunger process, there are two processes. The glucostatic model is regulated by the sugar concentrations. When we eat food and we have this glucose, our body requires more of this glucose and hunger is stimulated. And the other model is the lipostatic model, when the fat levels lower, that also regulates the eating of certain foods. In this model, there is a lot of reference to those women that have very low fat levels and the hormone leptin that regulates the eating of food, that regulates the hunger. When there are not enough leptin levels, these women are not hungry. There are, for example, some athletes that have some very hard restriction. It's very hard to take them to a proper body composition. Let's remember the satiety center, the hunger center. Our central nervous system is very key to have a very proper chewing process in order for the process to be thorough from mouth to the intestines. And we have to take into consideration that it takes approximately 20 minutes. So, what is conscious eating useful for? It helps for us to be less automatic about food and to understand how am I eating, am I sitting, having the proper pauses, am I connected to the foods or to the cell phone or to the iPad or other things. It makes us connect in the present to what we're doing. In the conscious eating, we also understand when to eat, because physiologically, the commands that our body gives us are different, and in every person there are certain sensors that determine their eating behavior. Some people, and right now there's another branch that is called the chronobiology, and this branch studies the cycles of rest and the circadian rhythm to determine how the eating behavior is. Some people are work better in daylight, and some people work better in the afternoon, and some people work better at night. And according to this, you can detect when to eat according to the circadian rhythm in each person. Where to eat, that's another important aspect. In the car, standing next to the fridge, from the pot, or sitting in a proper table, well organized, with time to give nutrition to the most important person, that is ourselves. Also, it leads us to ask ourselves, what's the quality of the food that I'm eating in order to prevent all the chronic diseases? And how much am I eating? We can select very high quality foods, but if we have an excess of those foods, that's gonna translate into gaining weight or metabolic disturbances. Let's remember that from the pillars of conscious eating, why, how, when, where, what, how much am I eating? If we begin to, in a very simple way, to breathe before sitting and to scan ourselves with these questions, we're going to make very different decisions. What is conscious eating? It is to turn off our automatic pilot in order to enjoy the here and now and enjoy the gastronomic experience of eating. Conscious eating has a great advantage. It's born from the empowerment and from our inner selves, and that's sustainable in time. It makes a lot of highlight in the here and now. It doesn't support diets or restrictions in eating, because in the conscious eating, you become the expert on how to handle your body. And when you connect to your body, you start to identify the flavors, your schedule, and each one begin to know themselves better and make proper decisions. There's a triad in the conscious eating, a thought, and it determines a sensation. That sensation triggers an emotion that allows me to interact in different ways with food, not only from the physiological aspect, but also in the emotional aspect. And that's where conscious eating is very key, because there are many different types of hunger: the physiological hunger, or the hunger from the heart when we're sad, or stress hunger, or vitamin hunger when there are deficiencies. For example, in pregnant women, in the beginning of the pregnancy, certain predispositions for citrics, for example, the body begins to manifest this inner wisdom, and everyone has to learn how to connect clearly and easily. Let's remember that conscious eating is to be aware of what we eat, detect what thoughts we have related to food, what behaviors determine this eating. It's important to accept our body shape, and to be aware how to develop our best version. Conscious eating is to be very aware of our satiety and hunger, what to eat and what not to eat, not to judge the experience, is to enjoy the moment. And when in a process of conscious eating, we begin to chew properly, it's not about the number, it's to do the following. Take the first sip of the food and take the food to every single corner of our mouth. When we activate the sensors in our mouth, we are also sending the signal to regulate our eating. It's important to understand the decisions that we're making in this conscious eating. It's important to be compasive and to avoid these comments that you hear often. I look like a cow, I ate like a pig. All that information that we give our brain is going to remember. We have to start from what we want and avoid these thoughts that don't help and don't motivate us to move forward. In order to understand conscious eating, I want to share in a very simple way what are the guidelines that I work with the patient to understand hunger. This is a rate 1 to 10. 1, it's a very mild hunger, and there is no need to eat. Eating comes when you reach 4 or 5 in the scale. It's important to avoid the level 10 because that's painful. And it's important to understand this process better with intermittent fasting, to understand better the hunger process. We scan ourselves before eating, and if we feel our hunger in our abdominal region, that's where you actually eat, not in your mind or in your heart. This is a training where patients become more and more aware in order to empower and make the best decisions regarding eating. On the other hand, we see the satiety level. The satiety is where I feel good, I love the food, but this is enough. So satiety of 1, 2, and 3 is normal. The body can continue eating. When you're 4 or 5, you should stop. It's very delicious, I loved it, but I need to avoid this discomfort where there is abdominal distension or reflux, because in the long term that's gonna bring a lot of disturbances to your digestive tract. The invitation is for every one of you to know yourselves better and to understand these scales. This is another scale, the satisfaction scale. It goes from 1 to 10. 0 and is not satisfied, and 10 is totally satisfied. Let's remember that we need to use 75% of our gastric capacity in order for the proper mixture of food to take place. So if we reach a level 10 in satiety, it's very hard for the process of digestion to take place. It's better to reach 75% of the gastric capacity in order to have good results. We do this And sometimes patients bring the food that they love, or with water or with certain beverages, in order for them to understand when to stop, in order to do the programming. You need to know that this exists and that you can start in a very normal and very in a daily way. So in order to continue talking about conscious eating, these are some tips. Stop before eating and identify if you are really hungry. In these times that we are in lockdown, is very normal. There has been a lot of emotional disturbances, these worries and these economical problems. So it's important that we identify hunger or worry or any other conflict in order to find the solution. Second is to be grateful for the food and to breathe. When we breathe, we can produce ghrelin, and the ghrelin is a hormone that regulates hunger. When we breathe, we identify ghrelin, and we identify when to eat. Third, to eat slowly. The idea is to leave our fork and knife on the table. Fourth is to avoid distractions like the cell phone or television or any other chat, is to be aware. Fifth is to eat sitting in a table, in a proper table, in a beautiful table, in order for our brain to codify properly. Let's remember that eating is pleasure, it's hedonic. So if everything that surrounds the food is beautiful, we're going to codify the information better. And we're going to be able to control anxiety. Seventh, evaluate our levels of satisfaction. That's where we apply all the scales that I just showed. So taking this into account, the invitation is to, from now on, in one of your meals, you give yourselves the opportunity to apply all these tips and to start eating in a more conscious way. How to select? So we start by scanning and identifying our eating. We identify all those areas in the brain that are stimulated when I eat. Now we are going to start to understand how to select the foods that we're going to eat. There are some laws. The laws of eating. Eating must be whole. It must include all the nutrients that are necessary to promote an excellent lifestyle. It has to be balanced. It has to have proteins, carbohydrates, and fats in the appropriate level in order to avoid nutritional deficiencies, and that is sustainable. It has to be sufficient enough for it to generate satiety and to avoid deficiencies in micro and macronutrients. And it has to be according to the sex, of the activity of the person, of the work. It has to be adapted to every need of the person. And that's why it's very important. And I highlight that these fashioned diets are not the diets for the people participating in this event. Because let's remember that everyone is unique. So here we start to identify that maybe those magical solutions might come, but they're not sustainable. It's better to regulate our portions and to enjoy and be aware and to select healthy foods instead of restricting ourselves or losing weight very fast that just come back. Let's remember there are 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. We have proteins. Their function is to provide enzymes. Usually, all proteins participate in the formation of enzymes that regulate the production of saliva, the composition of the carbohydrates, the trypsin, the chymotrypsin. All these enzymes have a protein component. That's why it's very important to have a good protein level in our diet. They're very important for hormone production, and it's important to take into consideration what are those foods that can trigger the hormonal function in order to optimize the fertility processes. Enzymes are also transporters of micro and macronutrients in order for every single system of our body to build tissues and all these structures that are very important. And they have amino acids, essential amino acids. When they are together, they are like bricks, and they build our structures, especially muscle tissue. So it's important to enhance our immune system. A good protein level can help us regulate our immune system. It regulates movement in our body. If we have good muscle mass, we can have better movement. And let's remember that if we have more muscle, we have less fat. It's another great advantage of proteins. Proteins also serve as reservoirs in case of disease. At hepatic level, we can store some proteins that when we start to have any disturbance, they can be used as energetic storage. When we talk about proteins of high biological value, we have beef. There's a lot of controversy regarding beef, that it should be avoided. 2 years ago, the WHO issued a statement, and it was misunderstood. The latest guidelines of the cardiology associations state that beef is okay as long as it's lean, as long as it's not highly processed, as long as they haven't added any other fat. You can eat it 2 times per week at the most. So we can eat chicken and fish 5 times per week and 2 times per week beef, with the exception of people with low hemoglobin levels or vitamin B12 levels. In that case, we have to personalize the treatment. And what would be the frequency of beef? Regarding chicken is a very good option. It has a high biological value protein. It has essential amino acids like leucine that optimizes muscle growth. It's important to avoid the skin. We used to say that we could only eat breasts, but recently in Colombia there was a research on the various parts of the chicken, and the conclusion was the fat levels were very similar, and the preparation is very important. Pork is now raised with more technology, and there are certain beliefs, some religious beliefs, where people avoid it, and that's valid and can be replaced for other foods. We have to take into consideration the entrails If there are cardiovascular disease, we have to control these entrails or viscera. We continue with cold meats. Let's remember that if we are in a program of fetal programming, we need to avoid them completely, both in the men and the women that are going to start the process. They have a lot of additives, sulfites, nitrates, that can trigger dysfunctions in the egg and the sperm. It's key to avoid them completely. There are supposedly healthy options like turkey or brands that guarantee good quality, but it's not about the brand, but it's about the protein level that is very low and is highly processed. With tuna, it might be a good option. The problem is that when it's canned, it comes with the additives and preservatives that might trigger disturbances. It's better to prefer the presentation in jar, in glass, so we avoid the preservatives. That might be a good option. It's tuna in glass, that's better. An egg, many years ago, it was very badly seen, but right now the guidelines of the Cardiology Association in the United States support eating egg. And if there's no cardiovascular disease, you can eat one egg daily. And if you have cardiovascular disease, you need to limit it to 3 times per week. The egg has essential fatty acids that can be very nutritious for our brain, and it can promote the development of the nervous system of the baby. It's an excellent option. The idea is to be aware of these myths and to be able to make more conscious decisions. Dairy. Now we continue with dairy. Let's remember that dairy have been the center of many controversies by many schools, but definitely the profile of amino acids and protein is very unique, and it's not in any other type of milk. So who can take milk? People who are developing, an adult who has some requirements, people who don't have previous diseases, women in their early stages of pregnancy, because let's remember that whole milk has essential fatty acids that promote the development of the nervous system of the baby. Lactose-free milk was in boom for all the people that was intolerant to lactose, and it was supposed to be the best option. But if we analyze the highly processed foods, lactose-free milk has lactose, and they break down the lactose into galactose and glucose, and that's why it's sweet. So those people with diabetes or with carbohydrate intolerance, it's not proper, it's not adequate for them to take this milk. It's better to dilute whole milk, 70% milk, 30% water, instead of lactose-free milk. Because let's remember that when foods are non-something, it implies more technology, more processing that makes the food more synthetic, more chemical. And that's where the disturbances of the endocrine processes come in. So that's why we say that as the more natural the food is, the less labels it has, it's better. We'll continue with skim milk. It could be an option for those people who have high cholesterol levels or who want to control the excess of fat. But on our daily practice, we don't see people who take 1 liter of milk per day, 1 cup per day at the most, maybe when they take coffee. So if the tendency is 1 cup of or less, it's okay to use it whole or diluted by half. Or if they prefer to use skim milk because of the cholesterol levels, that's fine too. There are some other milks that are enriched or fortified. They are fortified with iron or vitamin D or more other vitamins. For those people who are deficiencies or need to gain weight, might be an option. For children, for BMI levels are very low, or people who want to improve their resistance or performance levels, that could be a good option. And in early stages of pregnancy, for those women who need to gain weight. Another important topic, it's beverages based in almonds. We used to talk about almond milk, but 3 years ago, they did a research on all these supposedly almond milks, and they found that they had very high levels of sugar, water, but very low levels of protein. And FDA issued that it could no longer be called milks, and it should be called beverages based on almond, soy, and these are options for vegans or vegetarians that don't drink milk from animals. But let's remember that they have a lower protein level, with the exception of a beverage prepared at home, like 10 almonds in 1 glass of water. That has a better protein value than the commercial presentations. Regarding yogurts, we have diet yogurt. Let's remember that these are modified in their sugar and fat levels, but it's not 0 calories. 0 calories is water. There are many options. We can use diet yogurts, but the key is to identify what sugar are they using in order to substitute the normal sugar. Some yogurts use a lot of fruit in order to compensate. The best diet yogurt is a natural yogurt, and that you add the fruit to it without adding any sugar. Sesame beverage is a very nice beverage. It has a lot of calcium. 1 tablespoon in a glass of water is enough. They're not milks, but vegetable beverages. Regarding soy milk, there is a lot of controversy because of the GMO. So if the soy is certified as organic, it's a good choice because it has a very good amino acid profile. But if it's not like that, in this process of phyla programming, it's better to avoid it. So we went through all dairy. Let's continue with carbohydrates. There are 2 types of carbohydrates, simple and complex. In the simple ones, when it lowers what we want, more sugar, more breath, so the simple carbohydrate triggers more anxiety and more desire for all these foods that are loaded with a high glycemic index and calories. Let's remember that some women that has infertility problems, they have carbohydrate intolerance. With polycystic ovarian syndrome, for example, they cannot tolerate simple sugars. There are other type of sugars, the complex ones. They are a very good option, and they are corn, wheat, oat, barley, rye, and their derivatives, rice, bread, pasta, cereals, and potato, legumes, chickpeas, peas. In the process of fetal programming, an excellent choice to include is legumes like beans, chickpeas, lentils on their own, or added in salads or in other preparations like hummus. And you cook the legumes with a little bit of olive oil and lemon, and it can be a good choice for a salad. Cereals should be whole. Bread, toast, they should be whole. But there's something important here. These cereals, we need to identify how whole they are. The whole product, the whole bread or cracker, it should be heavy. If it's not heavy, it's not a good quality food. Because the ones that are dark, there are some coloring that even can enhance the glycemic index. Regarding rice, it should be whole, because when all these cereals are processed, vitamin B is taken away from the cereals, and it's important for the process of fetal programming. We have fruit. Let's remember that they have the advantage of having a lot of fiber, water. They're good sources of phytonutrients, the substances that give color to food. Fruit help to regulate our intestinal rhythms in order for us to avoid constipation. We can keep them in our workplace. They're good for satiety, and 5 portions per day is what's recommended. It depends on the type of fruit. If there is a carbohydrate intolerance for women with polycystic ovaries, we need to use fruit with low glycemic index. The glycemic index is the speed at which a food can raise my sugar level. There is high, medium, and low glycemic index. We're going to use fruit with low glycemic index: apple, pear, peach, tangerine, granadilla. Let's remember that we need to eat fruit whole. We need to avoid juices, because juices stimulates insulin levels, and we eat a lot of fruit in a juice. Fruit has to be whole. If there is a resistance to insulins or carbohydrate intolerance, we need to control banana, grapes, sweet mangoes. Regarding the glycemic index, I want to share something. The glycemic index is regulated by 2 factors. It varies according to how ripe the fruit is. So if you eat a mango that is very sweet, it can activate the insulin levels. It can disturb the glucose levels of the whole month. We also have to consider cooking. If I have a carrot that is raw, it's perfect. But if I make them into a puree, the glycemic index is higher. There are many tendencies that say that fruit are bad because they give insulin resistance, but it's important to take into consideration the portion, the objective, any other previous pathology, And according to that, we can make decisions. If they're good at day or night, that varies according to our chronobiology, and we are the ones who make those decisions. If we're going to work out at night, for example, a banana is a good option, but if we're going to sit to watch TV, the banana is not a good option. So let's remember there is a key word, depending on the context, depending on each objective. We continue with vegetables. Vegetables have a very good advantage. They're rich in phytonutrients according to their colors, and those phytonutrients help modulate the life of the egg and the sperm. It's key to have a dish that is colorful, dark colors, spinach, yellow and orange vegetables that are rich in beta-carotenes, and that can stimulate the life of the sperm and the egg. The purples that has resveratrol and all these antioxidants that have a very good positive effect on our immune system and our genetic modulation. Berries, eggplant, grapes, that we have to include them on a daily basis. The red ones that are rich in lycopenes. Lycopene is highly associated with their male reproductive system, is a very good option. The white ones, and like cauliflower and mushrooms that we have, that have sulforaphanes that enhance the immune system. Let's remember the glycemic index. If we cook them, we change the glycemic index. It's better to use them raw or cook them until a crunchy level, and to take into consideration what we add. We have legumes, beans, peas, chickpeas, peas, and there is a myth that they produce a lot of gas, and we need to soak them at least 2 times in order to prevent the phytates, that are the substances that are not metabolized and that can produce gas. And besides soaking them, we can add a piece of ginger to regulate this production of gas, and this is done while cooking them. We have sugars. We have simple sugars like cane. They're not such a good option because they stimulate the production of insulin, and in the fetal programming that they're not our friends. Regarding sweeteners, let's remember that they are substances that can provide a higher level of sweetening into the foods, and aspartame and sucralose can be disturbing for our endocrine system, so they're not a good option. Right now, the only one approved by the American Association of Diabetes is stevia, and they're developing new products, so let's see how everything unfolds. The invitation is to eat sugars in moderation and use stevia as a sweetener. These are fats. There are like bad fats and good fats. For the fertility process, we recommend linseed, pumpkin seed, almonds, nuts. They're a very good option. The avocado has a very good fat. Women and men in fetal programming have to use avocado. If it has half of it, and if it's a bigger one, a quarter of it. Let's remember olive oil. I'm gonna stop here to explain better. If we're gonna use low temperatures, olive oil is good, but if we're gonna heat in a very high level, this is not a good option because it can oxidate easily. We can use avocado oil, and it's a very good choice. Fish, depending on the geographical region where you are, you can use salmon, tuna. Those could be good. White fish. When you get pregnant, you have to take into consideration the ones from the south because there is a higher pollution level of metals. Salmon from Canada, United States, and Norway have a better availability of fatty acids. Fats provide with energy. They avoid respiratory diseases, cardiovascular diseases. They intervene in the transportation, absorption of vitamins and other nutrients. Women with low levels of fat have a very poor hormone production because there is a restriction of liposoluble vitamins. So it's very to improve with very good quality fats. So fats are not bad. It's important to avoid the type and the amount of fats that we are using. Fats also protect and sustain all the tissues, all the important structures. It provides with protection against the temperature. Fats can shape differently the body of a man and of a woman. And in men, for example, it's more accumulated in the visceral area. Fats, it's important in the production of a lot of hormones, and that's why it's important to include them every day. 3 types of good quality fats. Let's remember the type of fats: saturated fat, the ones in animal sources, and butter. It's better to use cow butter than the processed margarines. Trans fats are the ones used in pastry. When a pastry is very voluminous, there is more trans fats, and those trans fats can alter the whole cardiovascular system. There are polyunsaturated fats that are excellent aid, and we find them in fish, nuts, oils like soy or corn, and they're a good choice. And monounsaturated fats that we find them in dried fruit and olive oil. We have to lower trans fats and eat more poly and monounsaturated fats. We have vitamins and minerals. It's key for fetal programming to evaluate iron levels, calcium, magnesium. In nuts, for example, we have a good availability of magnesium, zinc, that we find them in fish and nuts. In this way, we have a good bioavailability, and that's why our eating is like a rainbow. It should be very colorful and balanced. So step by step, we're gonna see all these nutrients. Folic acid or vitamin B9 is one of the most important ones before getting pregnant. It avoids defects of the neural tube, and in the process of fetal programming is the most common supplementation. We find it in green vegetables, spinach, broccoli, pea, kale, nuts, avocado, and legumes. This is an excellent source of micronutrient. In the process of fetal programming, we have vitamin D, that right now that we're in these pandemics, we have a lot of deficiencies. Besides good nutrition, we find that vitamin D deficiency is associated with fertility problems and complications during pregnancy. We find it in tuna, salmon, cheese, egg yolk, and it's important to expose ourselves at least 10 minutes to the sun to activate the vitamin D. And according to the medical criteria, you can supplement it. In the process of fertility, it's important to assess it. We have vitamin C. It's very important for its antioxidant capacity. And besides that, it helps to maintain cells healthy, like cells from our ovaries and the immune system. It improves the absorption of iron. To reach vitamin C levels, we have to take citrus, pepper, tomato, broccoli. Vitamin E is essential to have very good reproductive health. It helps for pregnant women. And for women with low levels of vitamin E, it's important to supplement with olive oil, nuts, fish, avocado to stimulate the development of the neurological system of the baby. We have alcoholic beverages in the process of fetal programming. We have to avoid them completely. In the worst case scenario is 1 cup of wine per day because of the resveratrol, but we have to control it. Water is a very important nutrient. It's 55 to 60% of our body. And in the hypothalamus, we have the center where we regulate our thirst. It helps us with constipation, with body temperature, aging, in case of anxiety. It lowers our gastric capacity. It has to be very personalized. If we have people that can retain water, it's better for them to take them in the morning. It's ideal to have 6 to 8 glasses of water. And according to the weather, you have to modify it. We have spices. They don't have a very important caloric value. We have garlic. These spices can be used in the process of fetal programming, and we have to avoid herbal teas. And why to have breakfast? In that way, we can renew our energy storage. It can help with hypoglycemia. It can help in our brain function. It is the way to break our fast of 12 hours after sleeping. It activates our hormonal mechanisms. Options for breakfast: water, whole fruit, carbohydrate like bread, arepa, crackers, toast, whole foods, egg or cheese. We can have a hot beverage, and it all depends on the activity level of the day, of the job. Healthy snacks could be fruit, nuts, diet jello, yogurt, herbal tea, chocolate bar with at least 75% of cacao, or homemade ice cream to control anxiety levels. For lunch, we can use soups or broths, salads, cooked or raw, protein like chicken, beef or fish, legumes, and cereals with low portions. And to finish with water or herbal tea, not juices. If you take your lunch to your job, soup or broths, salad with a protein, with a good legume and a herbal tea. When we pack our temperature, our food, we have to take into consideration the temperature and to separate each food in order to avoid the contamination between them. The proportion is like this: 50% of the dish is salad, 25% protein, and 25% carbohydrate. That can be complex legume like bean, peas, or chickpeas. If you have dinner at home, they depend on your nutritional state, the schedule, your physical activity, the weather. You can use a broth or something similar to breakfast. Control the carbohydrates. And if you have any gastrointestinal disturbance, avoid a lot of food. Options for dinner could be arepa with cheese, wrap, broth, sandwich, veggie burger. With everything that we have stated, we can prove. And my question is, tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. I want to finish with this and leave this mark in everyone to make the decision to eat consciously, to make a proper fetal programming in order to achieve your objectives. Thank you very much. Wonderful, doctor. Thank you very much. It's very clear for us. It's not only what you eat, it's the way you eat, and that's why it's so important to do it very consciously. In order to close with your valuable presentation, 2 questions. How important is to take care of the nutrition of our patients when they start fertility processes? Let's remember with the presentation we clarify a lot of doubts, but it's important to modulate our body composition. We need to reach an optimal nutritional state, both in women and men, to activate the hormonal processes in order to achieve a good reproduction process. We have to regulate highly processed foods, and the most important thing is to eat in a very conscious way in order to become an architect that is building every single brick in the best possible way by making the best choices for that baby. Another question is, if I am in a treatment, starting a treatment, I am looking for a baby, if I'm going to the grocery store, what can I not avoid? Fruit in every color, veggies in every color, protein, chicken, fish or beef, olive oil, avocado, nuts like almonds. With that, and legumes like beans, peas and chickpeas, and that is very good options for someone who is starting a fertility process, and the queens are fruit and veggies. Yes, that's the rainbow that you were talking about. A message for the people who are watching right now regarding hope. Regarding hope, let's remember that we are the result of the decisions we make. So the invitation now is that in a very conscious way to have clear that everyone gets their babies at the appropriate time, not before nor after. So we have to trust and we have to make these decisions in a very clear way. Wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Sandra. A very big hug to you, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much, everyone. See you soon. Goodbye.